Hello, my name is Carmen. This is my Flosstube. Thank you for being here. If you're new, welcome. If you're not new, thanks for sticking with me. And this is my 2023 finish parade that I'm filming on the 21st of February because life got busy. I'm not good at like this whole schedule of Flosstube yet. I have to figure out how to be more consistent. That is one of my goals for the year. But anyways, a little late, but better late than never. This is my 2023 finish parade, and thank you for being here. I hope you will enjoy it. It's been really fun to pull all of these things out. Some of them I haven't really looked at in a couple of months, so I think this is going to be a very fun video for me to watch back, so hopefully you enjoy it as well. Before I get into it though, I do want to briefly remind you that I am hosting a SAL that you are all invited to join me on if you so wish, called the JacobSleeperSAL, and I have a video dedicated to it. It's my last video that I posted. I'll have it I'll have it in the description, and I'll try to there's a way you can link it on the screen somewhere, so I'll try to figure that out. But anyways, it's the most recent video on my channel. Briefly, you just choose a chart by Modern Folk Embroidery that is less commonly stitched, so maybe something that's a bit older or something that just kind of got overlooked, and you stitch it and you use the hashtag JacobSleeperSAL. And I am going to be stitching Charlotte Ramsey, and a little while ago I got in the mail my conversion from Evertote. This is all Roxy floss. The linen is speculace, and all these pretty colors that Hannah put together for me, and I'm very excited to start. I'm going to be starting on March 10th. I know some people are starting on March 1st, but honestly, you can start whenever you want. Some people have already started. It's not that strict. But anyways, I just wanted to remind everybody of that. And now with that said, let's get into my finish parade. Finally, my finish parade. You may notice that the wall behind me looks a little bit different, and you may have noticed that the wall behind me, for somebody who stitches as much as I do, is extremely naked. I have nothing framed because framing is expensive. Honestly, cross-stitching can be a pretty expensive hobby. It can also be super cheap. It just sort of depends how you do it and what you're stitching and on what you're stitching. And basically, in this moment in my life, I can afford cross-stitch supplies or framing, but not both. I mean, I could maybe pay for both, but I would feel very guilty about it. So I have just sort of stitched things, and I have things all kind of rolled up like this on a shelf over there, and every once in a while I unfurl my roll and I leaf through everything I've stitched and ooh and ah over it, but nothing is framed yet. Maybe by the end of this year I'll have one or two things framed. I can, invest in a couple of my favorites. So the reason why I have all of this set up here is that I thought I'd be really cute and build a sampler wall in this video, and as I show things, clip them up on this twine that is held up with painter's tape. So, it might fall down. I don't know. I have these cute little clothespins. Oops. Anyways, we'll see if it works. It might not work, but it's an idea, and it's like a vision board for one day when I'm rich and I have all the money to frame everything and I can cover all of my walls. Anyways, so that's the plan. So January 1st of 2023, I started something. I didn't even know that there was a New Year's start trend, like a lot of people do that. I had just kind of planned this out the end of 2022 that I wanted to start this in the new year, and I actually did the same thing again this year. But anyways, this particular project, if you watched my last proper Flosstube, I showed everything that I had stitched in 2022. I started stitching at the end of that year, and I mentioned that a lot of the things that I had stitched in that year were things that I wouldn't necessarily stitch again because I was just getting into it and I didn't really know what I liked yet. And so some of those projects I was kind of iffy on. And I would say that in 2023, pretty much everything I stitched I really liked, except for the very first project. It was kind of my last failed experiment, but I did stitch it, and I'm very proud of myself for having done this because it was a lot to chew. And I do think it's really pretty. It's just not at all something that I would want to stitch again. So with all of that suspense built, this is what it was. Right when I first started stitching again, I went on Etsy and I found this vintage pattern from, I believe, 1999. Yeah, 1999 Bucilla. I'm not really totally sure how to pronounce that, which is embarrassing because I'm Italian and I'm pretty sure this is an Italian company. Anyways, and I bought it. It was like 20 bucks or something. Came all kitted up with 18 count Aida, and here it is. And it kind of looks like it's framed, but it's actually one of these things. My mom's neighbor, or my parents' neighbor, gifted me some of these, and it was kind of the perfect size for this, so I just left it in here because I didn't really like using it that much, but it sort of frames this perfectly, so I just left it in there. And yeah, so this is my first and probably my last full coverage piece, because I hated stitching this so much. Yo, full coverage takes forever. Yo, so, okay, oh my goodness. The people who do all the heaven and earth stuff, you have all of my respect. This is a teeny tiny morsel of what some of those big projects are, and I like wanted to rip my hair out. And I'm kind of stubborn, and I finished it even though I knew pretty quickly into starting this that it was not my thing. But yeah, so basically if I decide I'm gonna do something, like it's very hard for me to like pull myself away from it, which is a good thing and a bad thing. And at the time I was binge watching all of Brenda and Laura's videos, and they kept mentioning like, stitch what you love, if you don't like it, put it down. And I was like forcing myself to stitch on this thing. And you know, while I was stitching this, I was like, okay, I'm gonna start the things that I love because I know that I'm going to finish them whether I like it or not. So my, compromise with the stitch with what you love is like, make sure that what you're stitching you actually know that you really, really like. Just because I know my character and I know that I'm not gonna stop until it's done, and then I want to enjoy my stitching. Anyways, I am proud of myself for having given it a go. And I realized as I was pulling all of this stuff out that this is actually the last time that I stitched on Aida. I have not stitched on Aida since. Anyways, I do think it's very pretty, so I'm not mad that I have it. I just absolutely would not stitch this again. The chart was super hard to read. It was not in color. Ugh. I did get a lot of practice in pin stitches though at the time. That was a new technique for me. So I'm not gonna hang this up. I'm just gonna put it here because I think that my clotheslines would not be able to support the weight of this thing. Not that it's that heavy. Anyway, so that's my first, well, it's my first start of 2023. My first finish of 2023, I'll pop up a picture of it. It was also my first sampler, and it's a gift for someone. I have some names blurred out just, for their privacy. In 2022, somebody I know had a huge year where she had a kid, but she also lost a kid. Anyways, I felt like it's kind of like a birth and memorial sampler, and it's based off of Modern Folk Embroidery AIO 1844. And I changed some things. I added the animals on the top. I replaced there are actually animals in that chart, but I replaced them for different ones that represent the family members, and there's some symbolism in there. And anyways, I won't dwell on it too much because I don't have it here to show you. So that was my first finish. Technically, I had started it at the end of 2022, so it kind of overlapped over those 2 years. The next thing that I started, and I'm also not going to show that because I didn't finish it until the end of the year, but I'll show you the charts now, was the 2023 Modern Folk Embroidery Stitch Along. This was an exciting thing for me. I also won't talk about it for too long because I'll talk about it more at the end. But I also got the alternative trees, which was like a separate booklet that you could get to, this central motif. It gave you a few other options for it. And I did this one here. But yeah, I'll talk about that a little bit more when it comes up later, because it did not get finished in January. It got finished in December. So it's actually one of my last finishes. The next thing that I stitched, I also don't have because it was a gift to my aunt, but I'll pop up a picture. I took a few pictures. I actually saw it over the Christmas break because we had dinner at her house, and it was it was with like all this other wiener themed decor. She has a wiener dog named Freddie, and like me and my brother were like going around the house and trying to count how many wiener decor pieces we could find. Their Christmas tree was just like covered in wiener dogs. Anyways, they are very into their dog. It's very cute. Anyways, so when I saw this pattern online, I knew I knew it kind of had that part of my family's name screaming all over it. So this is Plum Street Samplers Teenie Weenie, and this was my first time using like called for fancy floss. It calls for a whole bunch of Weeks Dye Works and Classic Colorworks colors, and I had ordered this on 1-2-3 Stitch, and like they make it very easy for you to kit something up, so I was like, okay, I'll get all the flosses. and I did. So I used the called for. There was one color that I think there was just like a boo-boo on their website where it just like didn't show up as a called for floss, and I didn't realize till I got the chart that I used something different. Oh yeah, River Rock. Yeah, I put a little post-it with my specs, like what materials I used. So River Rock I didn't get, instead I used DMC 223. And I also used Classic Colorworks Cocoa Bean instead of Hickory Sticks because I think they were out of stock or something like that. And I stitched it on 32 count flax, which I think is also the last time that I stitched on that big of a thread count. Well, I guess that low of a thread count, which is bigger stitches. Oh my goodness. And I finished it into a pillow, and I still don't really know how to like finish things in a fancy way, so I just did like that, what is it, a blind stitch? No, I don't know how to explain it. Anyways, not that fancy. It's a pretty basic finish, and I kind of wish I'd stuffed it more because I don't know, I could have done a better job stuffing it, but I'm very much a beginner in finishing, so she was happy with it and I was happy with it too, and it's super cute, and I'm very tempted to just get like every single wiener dog Plum Street sampler pattern because there's a whole bunch of them, and I think they're continuing to come out, and just make them all for my aunt because she loves wiener dogs, and I think that would be really cute. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about some of the goals that I had set for myself for 2023. I had 3 goals that I had set for myself. I had the goal of stitching with silk. I wanted to experience that. I had the goal of tea dyeing my own linen, and I also had the goal of stitching Dutch samplers. And by the month of February, I had achieved all 3 of those goals. So I maybe could have, reached a little further. But yes, so right now I have 3 samplers that I'm going to show you. Well, actually one of them's not a sampler, but 3 pieces, and I'm going to show you stitched in 3 different kinds of silk. And I kind of just went with the silks that I had heard of in Flosstubes the most often. I didn't really do any, big deep research. But the first of the 3, and unfortunately this once again is a gift, so I have nothing yet to put on my wall, but don't worry. I have a lot of stuff in this stack here that's going to come up very soon. So the first thing that I stitched, which was a gift for my mom, was Annie Baxter by GiGi. And I think I have a picture of this. I stitched this on, yes, I used NPI silk. I have it in this little bag. One second. I just put it on like an old floss drop from Roxy Floss because I didn't know how to store it. And the color that I used was 208 NPI silk, and I will never forget the feeling of, here, I'll do it here. I cut out a length of this, and then I just needed one thread. And the feeling of doing this and feeling that thread go through my fingers and how nice it felt, it was like a full body shivers, like, oh, this is really nice. This is really nice and different. And you know, I'm still mostly stitching with cotton because it's a little expensive, but oh my goodness, the stitching experience with silks, especially NPI, because of the three that I'm going to show you here, this I think is kind of the softest. At least to my fingers, it feels the softest. So I stitched this on vintage country mocha, and I, in hindsight, wish that I had stitched it on the back side of that, because I do like the color of the back side, but I don't really like vintage country mocha. And also, I realized that this color just didn't look very nice on it, so I feel kind of bad. I bought a custom frame, I framed it, I laced it in the back too. I went really intensely on the lacing. It's like every 2 millimeters, there's like another wrapping of lace. I definitely did not need to be that intense about it, but I don't know what I'm doing. I don't want to do it wrong. So hopefully I have a picture of that on screen. I hope that I had taken a picture of it. Maybe I did, maybe not. Anyways, it's not the most beautifully finished piece, but I did experience stitching with silk. And also I chose to stitch this part that says "Be kind to mother" in like a light pink because I had the feeling, okay, so GGR will put the a picture of the original on the cover of their patterns, and you can see quite clearly that "Be kind to mother" is in a very faded red, whereas everything else is in a much richer, deeper red. So I had this idea. There's no information that comes with this, so I don't know if this is true, but I was imagining little Annie Baxter, and maybe this was like already pretty much completed, and then she was like a little bit naughty, and then as a punishment, her parents were like, "You must be nice to your mother, put it on your sampler." And then she used a different floss on a different day to put "Be kind to mother" on there. You know, like when kids are in trouble and they have to go to the chalkboard and say like, "I will not steal," like 500 times to like get it into their head. Anyways, maybe that's what this was. I don't know if it actually was. But anyways, I chose like a faded pink DMC for the "Be kind to mother." And then I gave it to my mom, because who else am I gonna give this sampler to? Of course it goes to my mom. Anyway, so that was the first of the silk pieces that I worked on. The next one was the first thing that I'm gonna put on my makeshift sampler wall. And this I've shown before. This is Swedish pin cushion by Modern Folk Embroidery, and I stitched this on 40 count sand by Fiber on a Whim. I thought this was going to be a brown linen, and it was very green, but I really like it in combination with the silk that I chose, which is Soie d'Alger. And once again, I will pull it out of my little baggie here. So the color that I ended up using was 946. It's a red. All three of these silk samplers were red. It felt appropriate to do some red pieces. And this is also, it's a bit fluffier than the NPI. It has a really, really nice coverage on 40 count. It's a little bit better coverage than cotton, I find. And I really, really enjoyed stitching this. It was a bit of a, like, I had to concentrate, like there's just a lot of counting. It doesn't, yeah, I did have to refer to the pattern a lot. I remember these like leaves in the corners really like confused me for some reason. And I also talked about this the last time I showed it, but I just love this guy's pants. I want pants like that. Anyways, so this was one of many Modern Folk Embroidery pieces that I stitched in 2023. And with that, let's see if I can get those to hang up over there. All right, so nobody look at my butt while I'm doing this, okay? Don't be weird. How does that look? Not great. I don't know if this is a horrible idea, but anyways, there she is. The first piece of stitching on my wall. Anyways, so that leads me to my last silk piece. I did them all in a row, and this one was by Sub Rosa Design, and you'll have remembered that I finished the AIO sampler in January, and with this I officially hit all 3 of my goals for the year because I tea-dyed this linen. It was like kind of like an off-white, just plain Zweigart, and I think I used Lapsang Souchong, which is like a very smoky tea. It doesn't smell like it anymore, but it did smell like it for a while. And this is Ruth Johnson by Sub Rosa Designs. And I actually reached out because I didn't realize that, this is early in the year, I didn't realize that people made like fake historical samplers. Like there's a name and a year on here, but the listing on Etsy said it was an original design. So I actually reached out to the designer and I was like, did you design this or is this a reproduction? And I was told that it was an original design. So oops. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I just was like, oh, this is a fake person who doesn't exist. And this is 46 count. So this is also my first time stitching on 46 count, which I have learned that I really, really like. And I used 103 from Swedish. Not Swedish. I used 103 by Oakley. And the color I used is 136, I believe. That's what it says. Or, ooh, yes, 136, which is kind of a rusty red. Oh, it's so shiny in the camera. Ooh! And I haven't stitched with this since, but I would like to because it's much more affordable than the other 2 silks that I've shown. But it is a very fine, I mean, if you are experienced with silks, I feel like I'm kind of preaching to the choir, but it's a thinner weight, I guess, of thread, and so it doesn't cover like on 40 count as well, I would imagine. However, I have no experience stitching it with it on 40 count, but on 46 count looks great. I really liked this. And this is the only piece that I did not iron. Oops, sorry. I kind of want to use the second half of this to do another Sub Rosa and use the same silks because I didn't even use half of what I had bought for this. So I definitely could do, she has a few more that are in the same like orientation, so I feel like they would pair nicely together. So I'll probably do that at some point. Anyways, so I will add this second silk piece to my sampler wall. That looks a little better. It's probably because it doesn't have like the excess fabric that this one has. Anyways, moving on. Okay, the next 2 pieces. Oh, and by the way, I'm like not entirely sure that I'm getting the order of stitching all of these quite right. I think I'm right so far, but after this point, I'm not sure if everything is completely chronologically accurate. But anyways, the next 2 that I'm going to show you were both from Country Sampler, both kits from Country Sampler, and I definitely, part of the reason why I wanted to buy these kits was because I had seen so many people show those pretty packages when you get a kit from Country Sampler. It's like all wrapped up nice, and it almost looks like something you could frame just like that, the way that they fold up the floss over the linen. Anyways, whatever. So the first of the 2 that I did is Mary Oakley 1818 by Pineberry. So this is the pattern, and this is the finished piece. And this is a conversion of theirs. It's almost all of the called for. There's a couple of flosses that are different, and it's a different linen. The linen is Vintage Buttercream by Lakeside, which is also the only time that I've ever used Lakeside. And it is a very nice color. You don't get as much contrast. There's a little bit more tone on tone in this on this linen, but I quite like tone on tone generally. There is a different one though that I have later in the year where it's like a little bit too much, but we'll get to it. This I was really happy with. This is actually the wallpaper on my cell phone because it is just like the perfect size and orientation for a wallpaper for your phone. So that is still, I get to see this every single day on my phone. put this up now. There she is. Okay, and the next one that I stitched, again, a kit from Country Sampler, is Jane Plenderleath. And this is one of my favorite things that I stitched in 2023. So here is my finished piece. And this was stitched with all of the called for. Everything is called for. The linen is, I believe, Straw by Weeks. And some of these colors are just so surprising. There's like a, almost like a neon green in some of these trees. And I love how this tree especially kind of looks like the original stitcher, Jane, I'm assuming, ran out of one color of green and switched to a different one. And it's, I just love stuff like that. This is also my first time doing eyelets. There are some eyelets in here. Wait, hold on, where are they? Oh yes, they are in the like the stem of these, I guess they're tulips, some kind of flower. And you can kind of see that they get neater and nicer as I went along. And I guess I could have like ripped it out and made them all nice and neat, but for me it's kind of fun to see my improvement as I worked my way across. And yes, I love this. Honestly, just this top row, I feel like that repeated over and over on the edge of like a table runner or something would be so pretty. Anyways, a really, really pretty sampler. I loved this. I loved working on this. I love looking at it. It's one of those ones where I pull it out every once in a while and I'm like, oh, it's so nice. It's so nice. Anyways, I'm gonna put this up next to Mary. I might run out of space because I have a lot more pieces to get through. And I feel like I've already used up almost half of my space. It's okay, some things might get hidden by the end, but whatever, we're just gonna roll with it. Okay, the next one, I have talked about this pretty extensively on my channel so far because it is one of the things that I am most proud of that I did last year and that I've done in stitching in general, and that is in the Garden of Holland by Modern Folk Embroidery. And this is a conversion that I made. I will pop that conversion on screen now in case you want to do it. This is all Roxy Floss. I stitched it on 40 count porcelain by Roxy Floss, and I changed some of the colors, and I won't, I don't want to be too repetitive because I know I've talked about this quite a bit, but I'm very, very proud of this. This was, I think this is like one of my greatest stitching accomplishments. And I had a lot of fun, very spring, very optimistic. This is a very joyful, joyous sampler. And I absolutely would stitch this again in a heartbeat. In the called for even, maybe. Just have like a vintagey version and my bright version. Anyways, I love looking at this one. I'm very proud of it. And on the wall she goes. Oh, side note about this one. When I finished this, I took a picture of it and I sent it to my mom, and she was like, oh, are you gonna make that into a pillow? I'm not, this is a pillow that people sit on and fart on? No way. I was like so offended by that. No, Mom, this is not gonna be a pillow. Jeez. I'm definitely gonna run out of room real quick. Okay, well, whatever. Okay, so I already mentioned Brenda and Laura. They are among my greatest stitching inspirations, and I love their Flosstube and their friendship and everything. And behind them, well, they kind of film in a couple parts of Brenda's house, but for many videos, especially the older ones from like more than a year ago, they were in a room in Brenda's house, and she has an antique behind her. And I just got a lot of comfort from their videos, and I also feel like I learned a lot of the who's who and the what's what in the cross-stitching world by binging all of their videos and just, absorbing their enthusiasm and all of their years of knowledge and experience. and I really loved that sampler hanging behind Brenda and Laura. And when I found out that it was a reproduction that had been already charted by the Scarlett house, I decided that I needed to have it as well so I can be just like Brenda. And of course, I am talking about Elizabeth Hunter by the Scarlett house. I used for this all of the called for floss, but the linen I used, I think it calls for like some kind of, I think like sand dune or vintage sand dune by Lakeside, and you know, good luck finding some of that. So I used Up in the Attic by Fox and Rabbit, and this is, you know, I've talked about one of my favorite pieces that I stitched in 2023. This was one of my favorite linens of 2023, and it's the only time I've actually used their linen. I have a few other pieces of theirs, but I'm almost like, I almost don't want to use them because they're like so nice, and it's like, I don't know what they do to it, but it's like kind of soft, and I don't know, it just feels really nice in your hands. And something about this that I really like is this very, very basic border. I generally will start with the border. When I stitch things, I kind of feel like a lot of the like annoying, tedious work is in the border because it's repetitive, and you know, you don't want to mess it up. Maybe it doesn't match up at the end, and you just don't want to have problems with your border and find out like at the end of your stitching. I also don't want to leave the boring thing to last. I'm definitely not an eat dessert first kind of gal. I want to get the boring stuff done first. But this is kind of an exception because I feel like this would just be a counting nightmare. So I did stitch the border as I went for this. And I love this style of sampler where it's like got alphabets and some people's names or whatever on the top, and then motifs on the bottom. I feel like it's kind of simple, but it's balanced. I don't know, I really like it. I like that there's a few others that are like this, and I feel like they would look nice all next to each other, so I guess I have to stitch them all. And yes, anyways, if you can't get your hands on the called for linen, Up in the Attic by Fox and Rabbit, everything showed up super nice. Maybe even nicer, I don't know. I don't know. I'm just very happy with it. I love this navy blue that I have used in many pieces since then. This is Fathom by Weeks. It's one of my favorite floss colors of all time. I just feel like it's so rich. And I love this sampler. And I feel like it's, you know, acknowledges the Flosstube and the people that I've learned from and have been inspired by. So to me, this is more than just a pretty sampler. It's also kind of an acknowledgement to the person who owns the antique. So thank you, Brenda. And of course, thank you, Laura. You're there too. Okay, on the wall she goes. Oh, where does she go? You know what? I am gonna cover up this guy because I like this guy more. Sorry, Bucilla, whatever your name is. Here, I'll do that. It's still there. Yeah, it's getting crowded back there, but it's fine. They'll be fine. Make room, everybody. Okay, and then the next thing I stitched is, once again, it's like one of my top 3 favorite things that I stitched last year and of all time, because I, you know, haven't been stitching for that long, so I don't have many other years to compete with. And this is Stacy Nash, Gathering the Greens, and I use the PDF chart for this, which is super nice because she has them on an Etsy shop and you can just get them right away. And when I started this, I didn't yet have like kitted up projects just sort of waiting for their chance. I didn't have anything kitted up. And I bought the PDF and I had some of the flosses, but not all of them. So I placed an order, but I had nothing else to stitch. So I started it anyways. And I was able to complete the border by the time the rest of the colors came in the mail. But that border is really kind of difficult. There's a lot of counting to do there. There's like these individual stitches where there's just like one stitch in green, one stitch in pink. Also the leaves, I think up in this corner, are like slightly different than the rest of them. I don't know if that's an intentional thing or maybe an oversight. I don't know. But I stitched it according to how it appeared in the chart. Ooh, Carmen from the future here, popping in. I'm editing my video and I'm at the part where I'm talking about Stacy Nash gathering the greens, and I'm explaining the dedication that I put into it, and I just like did a horrible job explaining it. So I'm just gonna explain it again and insert this clip into the video. But yes, this is a sampler that means a lot to me, and it's a sampler that has a secret. There's a secret in here. And maybe if you have a very good eye, or you have extremely good resolution on your TV screen, you might be able to see something that's a little bit different about this. So here's the reason why the sampler means a lot to me. And a lot of it has to do with the name that it's given, Gathering the Greens. Gathering the Greens makes me think of like, the vision I have that comes to mind is like going into the garden and cutting your lettuce and your herbs and like maybe your tomatoes. Like to me, the gathering the greens makes me think of salad ingredients. And so here's the story of why I wanted to stitch this and what it made me think of. So I moved to the city I currently live in right before the pandemic. And I didn't know anybody here. I didn't have any friends. I play in an orchestra, so obviously like all of our concerts were canceled. Nobody knew what was going on. Everybody was like told to stay home. We had a curfew for a long time, so I had no social life to begin with, and then I couldn't have one, and there was nothing I could do out in the world. I don't have to explain this. I'm sure you all remember what it was like. But you know, it was particularly difficult for me because I was new to the city and I didn't know anybody, and it's like the smallest city by far that I've ever lived in, and that was already kind of an adjustment. And I had signed up a couple months earlier for this like farmer's market kind of thing where you place an order online and then you have a designated pickup day to pick up your order, and all of the food comes from different farms across the province, so it's all local. And when lockdowns and whatever were first announced, I got an email from them, and you know, I'm sure we all got lots of emails from lots of different organizations at that time, and one of their like major sources of revenue was restaurants, and they were explaining that it was a time of uncertainty for them because obviously the restaurants were all closed, so they weren't buying food from them, so they were kind of like trying to encourage us individuals to continue to support the market. And so the email was like kind of a lot of bad news. And then at the very end of the email, it says, "Mais dans une bonne nouvelle, on a du mesclun, but in good news, we have spring greens." Because it was the end of March, right? So it was the beginning of the season where you could finally start to harvest some fresh vegetables, because up until that point, it had just been like root vegetables from the previous year. And something about that little like PS, at least we were starting to get vegetables, was like such a little like morsel of optimism that really meant a lot to me at the time. And also because I wasn't really like leaving the house and I didn't have any friends here yet, when I would go to the market once a week to pick up my food, it was like the one social interaction I had for months. And the people who work there, like it's a lot of farmers who work there, a lot of volunteers, and just like salt of the earth, nice people who didn't know me but were really nice to me. And I just like really needed that at the time, and I felt a lot of warmth from them. So anyways, when I, first heard of this sampler, for whatever reason, like that memory of that marketplace, which I still go to, came to mind, and it made me think of them. And so the secret that I put in there is that I stitched them into my sampler. Do you see that? You can hardly see it. So this is 1/1 stitching, tone on tone. So I used whatever this off-white color was, because I wanted it to not really be apparent, but only I know it's there. And anybody who watches this video The market, MP are the letters that I put in there. It's just the name of the market, and then I put in the number 20 for 2020, because that was kind of the nicest thing that I got to experience in 2020 was that market. Oh, which is kind of sad, but you know, to me, this piece represents like a morsel of optimism, and thinking about it now, almost 4 years later, like my life is so much better now. So I kind of wish I could go back in time and be like, Carmen, it's gonna be okay. Anyways, I love this piece, even if it weren't for that dedication. I really like Stacy Nash. I love her composition. I feel like a lot of her pieces have a really unique sense of space. There's a lot of breathing room in here, and it allows you to appreciate the ground that you're stitching on, so the linen. And this linen is weathered by Number 12 Stitch Co. It is, once again, one of my favorite linens that I worked on last year. It's kind of a shell gray, a pinky gray. I believe the called for was gray by Weeks, but I didn't have any of that. And it looks excellent on this linen. So if you're looking for an alternative linen for this particular piece, I would highly recommend Weathered by Number 12 Stitch Co, as well as, you know, just check out their linens. They have some really cool colors. I feel like they have some cool dupes. I have a few other ones of theirs that I have in mind for other projects. Anyways, big shout out to Number 12 Stitch Co. Loved it. And also big shout out to Stacy Nash. She is a very gifted designer, and it's like she's one of those designers where I see a piece and I maybe have never seen it before, but I know exactly who designed it. It's like, yeah, that's Stacy Nash. Like, that's how unique her voice is. Anyways, that's all I had to say about this piece. I am going to revert back to Carmen from yesterday. So, Stacy Nash. I would really like to stitch more Stacy Nash in the future. I think she has a very unique voice. And this is the only thing I've done of hers, which is an abomination. I need to stitch more Stacy Nash. But for now, she's just gonna go on my wall. Okay, Ruth Johnson is getting hidden, and you know what, I'm kind of blocking. Whatever, it's fine. Okay, then in like June, July, I stitched some Christmassy stuff. Not because of Christmas in July, I don't know, it just kind of happened. I was on Etsy, and based off of, you know, all the other cross-stitching stuff I'd looked at on Etsy, it recommended a shop that had some original designs called Renato Parolin. And actually this was the chart that drew me to this designer. This is not the one that I stitched, but I did buy this one as well. And just a side note, they have a website, and if you order from their website, it's a little bit cheaper. So I found them through Etsy, but I ended up ordering off the website. And this is, I mean, I will at some point stitch this, but it has a really beautiful story attached to it. It's like written in Italian, and my Italian is almost non-existent, but it has a really nice story attached to it. Great inspiration. So that's that chart. But the one that I actually stitched was this one. This is just gorgeous. Gorgeous, gorgeous. And I stitched this on 40 count straw by Weeks with all the called for DMC. Ooh, that looks so nice on camera. Wow. I feel like there's more contrast on camera than there is in real life. Anyways, I noticed right away when I started stitching this that something felt weird. Because I was like, is this like 36 count? Because it just felt looser. Like, I don't know. Something about the linen felt off. So I took out my measuring tape and I measured how many stitches in an inch, and there were 20 of them. So I was like, okay, it is 40 count. And then I remembered there's the old Weeks and then the new Weeks, which is dyed on Skyward based linen. And then I was like, I didn't order old Weeks, did I? And then I went to the Etsy listing because I had bought this off of Etsy. And it said, I revisited it, and it said Skyward base. And I was like, oh, that's weird. And then I realized that on the previous line, it said not. at the end of the word. At the end of the line it said not, but I only read the last bit that said Zweigart based. So the listing very clearly said not Zweigart based, but I only saw... Anyways, whatever. I accidentally bought some non-Zweigart based straw by Weeks, which is totally fine. It looks fine. It's like a little bit see-through if you put it to the light, but I mean, if and when this gets framed, you're not going to notice. And stitching on it, it was fine. It doesn't feel as nice as Zweigart, but it's still very pretty. And I started at the bottom because I knew that if I started at the top, I would start to feel like I was getting slowed down because, you know, it gets wider and wider and wider. So I started at the bottom and now we're here. Anyways, this is beautiful. I feel like it's not like overtly Christmassy, but it's just so pretty, and these colors are so pretty together. It's a really beautiful color palette, and it's kind of modern looking. I don't have anything else that I've stitched that quite looks like this. And yes, it's a very ornamental, and wow, from far away it looks great. I mean, it's kind of symmetrical, but not perfectly symmetrical. Like there's a different thing on each side. Anyways, it's a gorgeous, gorgeous finished piece. And I think I started it in June and finished it in July. I can't remember. Anyways, it's going on my wall now. Oh no, I'm covering this thing. No. Whatever, I'm just gonna have to live with it. I've been reserving this spot for this particular piece. Yes. And then I had one more Christmassy thing that I stitched around the same time, and I don't have it anymore because once again, it was a gift, but I have some pictures. But it was this Jim Shore Mill Hill kit with the beads and everything, this snowman. And the version that I didn't do this back stitching in brown because I don't know, I didn't love how that looked. So I did like around the snowflakes, I did back stitching in like one of the light blue colors, and then I omitted the back stitching completely in this, like, I don't know if it's supposed to be a gust of wind or what, but I preferred my version, sorry. And yeah, it's a little different to what I normally stitch, but I think these Mill Hill kits are gorgeous. Once you see these on the Christmas tree, they're breathtaking. And with the beads, it's like glittery, it catches the light. They're gorgeous. And yeah, it's a lot of work, but whatever. Like, the end product is definitely worth it, I think. Beads are fun. Also, because there are beads on it, it's like a little bit heavier, which makes it feel more expensive somehow. I don't know, that's my brain's logic, so I also stitched that. At this point in the summer, Jacob of Modern Folk Embroidery released his massive Vierlande reproduction sampler, and I had ordered some floss and some linen specifically for it, but I couldn't wait to get it, and I needed my Vierlande fix, and I was down a Vierlande rabbit hole, and so I downloaded the PDF to his medium Vierlande, which is a original design, and I stitched this up with a lot of fury. I think I finished this in less than a week. It was summer holiday, so I had all the time to do it, and I just I was really intense about it. And I used, this is Porcelain by Roxy Floss and Chalkboard, also by Roxy Floss. And I will never tire of stitching black samplers. I think they are my absolute favorite. And I am working still on the large Vierlande, but it is a ways from being done. I'm over the halfway point, but you know, it's a big piece, so it's gonna take a minute. Actually, it's one of my 3 whips. So this is a finish parade. You're probably not gonna see a whip parade from me because I have 3 whips. That video would be 3 minutes long, so nobody wants to see that. Anyways, so it's 1/3 of my whips is the big Vierlande, but here's the medium, and this is a finish. And I think it's so cute and beautiful. And I want to make a black sampler wall with like Vierlande and Groningen samplers, and I think there's some English samplers that are black, or even like red samplers, but just stitching them in black. Anyways, I love black samplers. They're so cool. So she is going on my wall. Okay, Jane Plenderleath is not very visible anymore, but I have some bigger samplers that I need to save this spot for, so we're just gonna let things get a little crowded. All right, the next sampler that I stitched is another Scarlett house, Ceesie Smitt. This is a Dutch sampler, and this is a pattern I bought early in the year, but I don't know, I just didn't get around to it for a while, and I was really excited about it when I bought the pattern, and then, I don't know, I just like kind of lost, I don't want to say I didn't like it anymore. I still think it's really nice, but something about the colors are very like old school Christmas. I don't know. I don't know if I like it as much as I once did, which is fine. You can't love everything, but I am glad I did it. And I used like half the DMC called for and half the weeks. I really used what I had in stash. This is parchment by weeks, 40 count. With the exception of this, everything that you see here, oh wait, no, this was 36 count. This was 46 count, everything else is 40 count. And I think everything else that I have to show that I stitched in 2023 is 40 count. So if I don't mention it, that is my preferred count. However, I do really like 46 count too, and I need to do some more of that. All right, so I don't want to cover in the Garden of Holland, but I'm running out of space and I see an opening there. You could still see it a little bit. All right, moving on. The next thing I stitched is the last thing I stitched in 2023 that was not designed by Jacob de Graaf of Modern Folk Embroidery, because we are now entering the fall, and I went to a retreat that was all about that designer, and then I just had no interest in stitching anything by anyone else for a few months. But this is the last thing I stitched before I boarded the MFE train and didn't get off. And this is My Dear Hearts by Blackbird Designs. So this is the pattern, and this is my finished piece. I used the called for floss, but the linen I used was Wheat by Fiber on a Whim. I had actually originally bought this to stitch GH 1857, I think is the year by Sudeday. Oh no. And I just found it to be too green, but I still really liked it, so I used it for this. And actually, I mentioned earlier that I have one piece that has a lot of tone on tone where I'm actually not a crazy fan of it. And it's not really tone on tone, but the contrast between some of these colors, especially this yellowy color, is so slight that there is kind of a lot that is lost from this. Most notably, at the very bottom here, the name. I didn't put my own name, I put the name of the original stitcher. This is inspired by, or it's like based off of an antique. I have a picture of it in here. Yeah. So here is a picture of the antique. Oop, there's a lot of glare there. Here, that's a little better. So, you know, there are things that were changed, but it's very, very strong resemblance to the original. And here we have Barb Adams, who had stitched her name into it. I don't know why I don't want to stitch my name into things. I feel like it's narcissistic or something. I know it's not, and there's a reason for it. A lot of people do it. I'm not judging anyone who does that, but I don't know. I just feel weird doing it. So I used, I based it off of the picture of the antique that they have in there, and I put, what was her name? Emma Carriage, aged 13, 1873 at the bottom, but you can barely see it because there's just not a lot of contrast. And I actually did some fussy cutting with that floss. I found the lighter bits in the variegation, and I think I even went over the top leg a second time to make it more three-dimensional so that you could see it a little bit better. But in the end, I'm still very pleased with this. And this is my very first Blackbird Designs piece that I ever stitched. And yes, I understand the hype. It's very, very pretty, and also I find it very touching to listen to Flosstubers talk about what Blackbird Designs pieces mean to them. I don't know, there's just a lot of touching stories that have been shared on the internet, and it's kind of infectious, and there's something about the way that they name the pieces, and there's like a coziness and a comfort to Blackbird that I think a lot of us feel. So they really excel in that way. And also they're like re-releasing a lot of their older designs, which is great. It's great. You know what? I was convinced that this was all gonna collapse like once I put more than 3 things on it, and it's holding up great. Maybe I should just leave it like this all year round. I'm not doing that. That would be very silly. Okay, so now, as I mentioned, we have reached the point of the year where I have gone to London, Ontario. I have met Jacob of Modern Folk Embroidery, and I caught a virus, MFE, the Modern Folk Embroidery virus. I was ill with this virus until the end of the year. On my January 1st start of this year was actually a Blackbird Designs piece, and I like on purpose was like, I must choose a different designer. Like I cannot just stitch Modern Folk Embroidery. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but you know, you gotta spread the love, right? Anyway, so from this point forward, everything I'm showing you is Modern Folk Embroidery, and I hope you're okay with that. So the first thing, I actually stitched it twice, and I don't have either of them, but I do have a version of it that I stitched in 2022, and this is the Hanseatic Pin Pillow. I stitched this once as part of the Smalls Exchange at the retreat, and I also stitched it for my mom for Christmas. So she got a couple of stitched pieces from me this year, or last year. Anyways, so this was stitched on 32 count, but I had stitched those on 40 count. And I have some pictures that I will put up on screen, but I don't have them anymore. But I brought this out anyways to, you know, to represent the two pin cushions that I had stitched in 2023. So she's gonna go right there. The next thing I have on my list here is actually not designed by Modern Folk Embroidery. I lied. It was designed by me. And I have, for the last 3 years at Christmas, stitched a small ornament for all of the cellists in my section, in my orchestra. And in 2023, I made a little design of a candy cane, and I finished it with some green string, and I stitched that 9 times. I think I have a picture that I will put on screen, but of course I don't have those anymore. I'm kind of counting that as 1 finish, but maybe it's 9 finishes depending on how generous you want to be with me. But yeah, I stitched 9 of those. They're all gone. And now moving on to the more fun stuff, because I didn't really care that much about those ornaments. My colleagues liked them though, so that's good. All right, so the next thing, I have shown this in a floss tube, so if you've seen my other floss tubes, you'll have seen this. I mean, this is the point of the year where I started doing floss tubes, so actually you will have seen everything else at this point. Hope that's okay. Anyways, but this is Red Stag Among Roses by Modern Folk Embroidery. When I was at the retreat, I had Carrie make a conversion for me on the fly. If you want the conversion, I can give it to you, but it's quite similar to what you would get, I think, if you were to just buy it off of the website now. And I stitched it on panettone 40 count, and I love this. It is quite similar to the Red Deer sampler by GiGi, which is something that is, I think that's my favorite sampler of all time. Anyways, I kind of want to stitch like every Red Deer sampler that has ever come into existence, because it's something that you find in a lot of Dutch samplers. It has some important symbolism, and this reclining deer, I just like the vibe. I like the energy, and I think this is another beautiful, beautiful piece, and another wonderful reproduction sampler by Jacob. I haven't actually seen anybody else stitch this, and that's you know, abysmal. Everyone should stitch this. It's gorgeous. Okay, so I'm finally gonna fill this hole with one of my favorite things that I stitched all of last year. Oh, that looks so much better without the hole. The trouble is that I have 3 more things that I finished and there's not really any space. However, these 3 things were all finished with a hem stitch, so maybe they don't need to be framed. Maybe they don't need to be on my wall. I don't know. Anyways, so now we're going to reference the thing that I teased at the very beginning of the video, which was the 2023 Modern Folk Embroidery Stitch Along. And I kept up with every month, and I showed this in my last Flosstube. So if you saw that, you'll have seen it recently. But this is Reaching Skyward. I stitched this on 36 count panettone by Roxy Floss, and I used DMC Ecru and 924. And as I mentioned earlier, I used one of the alternative trees in the center there. And I didn't change the text at the bottom. I know a lot of people did, but I didn't have any creative ideas of what to replace it with. So I just went with Jacob's inspiration there. And I finished it with a hem stitch. And I guess I'll overlay again the video of me doing that hem. Actually, I have a few reels that I made on Instagram of these hems, and a lot of people have asked me about this. I'm going to repeat the same thing I repeated last Flosstube, that you should definitely go check out a video by Krista West of Avlea Folk Embroidery, who has an excellent tutorial on how to do hem stitch. It's a little bit different than the method that I have used. I learned this at the Jacobpalooza retreat, and it's Jacob's method, so it's not my intellectual property to share, so I can't really, you know, do a tutorial on it or anything. But if you want something that has essentially the same effect, I would definitely recommend Krista's video. And actually, I kind of want to try her method just to, you know, compare. So what should I do? Should I just like put this here? I'll just do that. I've had a lot of people on those Instagram videos that I had shared ask like, well, what do you do? Do you frame it? Like, how do you display it? I don't really know. I just kind of hang it on my chair that I have over there, and I get to pick it up and look at it. It's kind of nice to, I mean, when I asked Jacob this exact question, and he said that like, oops, he said that people might like kind of fold it up, roll it up, put it in their little basket next to their, you know, chair that they work in, and it was, you know, maybe more of a reference piece than a decoration for the wall. So I don't really know. I don't have an answer for that, but you could like just drape it off of something, or even you can frame it. And something Jacob mentioned is that because he doesn't do a mitered edge in his method, the edges kind of have a little bit of a padding, so it almost acts as a spacer. So that's kind of cool too. Anyways, I just really like how finished and clean it looks this way. So I'll put that here, why not? And then the next 2 that I finished, I kind of stitched them at the same time. Actually, one of them you haven't seen yet because I finished it after my video, my last proper Flosstube. So that'll be one last new thing to show. And they were the Holiday Countdown projects by Jacob, again, Modern Folk Embroidery. He has done for the last 2 years a collaboration with Evertote and Roxy Floss, where they have daily stitching assignments. Actually, there's a Valentine's Day one happening right now. But yeah, it's fun, and it comes with, you know, 25 different floss colors, and every day you get a new floss. I just got the chart, and I had like the daily cards that I pulled out for the 2023 version, but I didn't do it in 2022, so I just bought the PDF retroactively, and I did my own conversion. So this is the 2022 version. This is a Frisian band sampler. The original has it split into 2 sections next to each other, so it's oriented in a different way, but I reorganized. I did a lot of changes in this, and the colors I used were Tart, Sage, and Old Lace, and I used 40 count Snickerdoodle. And I did another hem stitch, and this is kind of like a double hem stitch, so just a slight variation. I really like how this looks. And some of the antiques that Jacob had brought to the retreat had this kind of a hem stitch, and I like took some close-up pictures of it and like tried to figure out how to do it when I got home. So I don't know if I'm doing it in like the authentic old Dutch way, but I like how it looks, and it's kind of cool to figure things out on your own as well. So that was my second to last finish of the year. Here, that can go there. And then my very last finish of the year was, of course, the 2023 version. And I don't know if this chart has like a name. It was just like the holiday countdown 2023. And again, I used all of the same floss and linen as I did for the 2022 version. I also did a hem stitch for this. And this I did a little bit differently. I think it's called like a serpentine hem. I don't know, I Googled it, and I, again, kind of just figured it out on my own, and I don't know if I did it right, but I don't know if there's really a wrong way to do it. It does end up with big holes in the corners. So I think I prefer this kind of a hem. Here, I'll show you both next to each other so you can compare. But yeah, I find this one just looks a little bit cleaner. But then this one looks a little bit more like a zigzag. So I don't know, depends on your tastes, I guess. And I definitely want to do this again next year because they're going to keep doing these collaborations, and maybe use the same flosses and linen again and just end up with a collection of all of the holiday countdown collabs in the same way so they all match. Do a hem stitch on all of them, have a little collection going. Anyways, again, I'm quite proud of this because I, made my own conversion, and makes me feel like I have some ownership over it. And so in my last proper floss tube, originally in that video, I said that I was going to wait until December 1st, or no, this was my second floss tube. I said I was going to wait until December 1st, and then I was going to look at all of the cards to, map out what colors I wanted to put where, but it's supposed to be a surprise, right? And after I put that up, a couple of people were like, no, you can't do that. So actually, I got nervous, so I went back. You can edit your videos a little bit after they've been uploaded. So I just went and like cut out the clip where I said that I was gonna look at all of the cards so that people didn't get mad at me. But I did in fact do that. Of course I didn't spoil anything. I only spoiled it for myself, but I really wanted to map out what colors I would put where. And I stitched all of the daily assignments along with everybody else. I didn't stitch ahead or anything. But I did peek at the last day's stitching just so I could plan things out a little bit. So I was a little bit naughty. I was a little bit naughty right before Christmas, which is, dangerous because, Santa can't be naughty before Christmas or after Christmas really, but, nobody's perfect, I guess. So that is my 2023 finish parade. I counted right before I started filming, and I finished 24 or 32 things in the year 2023, depending on how you count it. So like I mentioned, those ornaments, the candy cane ornaments, I did make 9 of them, but in my mind it kind of counts as one thing because they were really small. So in my mind it's just 24 finishes, but if you're feeling very generous with me, then I guess I finished 32 things. And I also did a little bit of reflecting on all the designers and stuff. 10 of the 24 pieces that I stitched last year were designed by Jacob of Modern Folk Embroidery. 2 were Scarlett House, and every other designer just got 1. So I clearly have a favorite. And there's nothing wrong with that. I don't want to get into a swing of only stitching one designer, but I think it's fine to have a preference. It's fine. But yeah, I mentioned this earlier, but I had 3 goals, which was to tea-dye linen, to experiment with stitching with silks, and to stitch some Dutch samplers. So I definitely hit all of those pretty early in the year. My goals for 2024 are a little bit looser. I'm gonna talk about this more when I do a proper floss tube, which I don't want to make any promises, but I'm planning on filming that in probably the day after tomorrow, but I don't know. Don't hold me to that because, I'm not, I haven't quite figured out how much time all of this stuff is going to take me to do, so I don't want to make any promises, but yeah, I have enough to make a proper floss tube. I just have to find the time to film it and edit it and post it and all of that stuff. But yeah, in 2024, on the 3rd of January, I taught myself to knit, and I have since knit, hold on, 7.5 pairs of socks. I actually finished a sock last night. I'm just gonna show you. This is the sock I finished last night. It's lace. Isn't lace cool? Anyways, I just really wanted to knit socks, and I can't remember if I mentioned this earlier in the video, but like I'm a little bit intense. When I decide I'm gonna do something, I do it in a really hardcore way, and that's a good thing in a sense, because then I can finish a lot of things in a year. Like, look at all the stuff I finished this year or last year. But it also means that I might end up punishing myself. Like the very first thing I stitched last year, this Bucilla piece, I didn't really enjoy it, but I did it anyways. And I think I need to just kind of cool it on the sock knitting a little bit. Not that I'm not enjoying it, but in last year, I think maybe 10 days I didn't actually stitch, and it was only because they were like huge work days, or I was traveling or something, like days where I really was like physically unable to stitch. And in 2024, like I didn't stitch at all for like 3 weeks because I was obsessively knitting socks. 7.5 pairs of socks in like 6 weeks when you have 0 knitting experience is like a little bit extreme. I'm not trying to like brag or toot my own horn. I actually see this as like somewhat of a problem. I really miss stitching. Like I'm getting a lot of gratification out of knitting, but I don't want to, I'm not just like a knitter now. I haven't abandoned stitching. So I need to find a way to balance things a little bit better, and also accept that it's okay to not finish something if you're not vibing with it, and it's okay to work on a couple of things at the same time. I don't watch whip parades. I have watched them, a couple of them, but they actually stress me out. Like, it's overwhelming for me to, even just watching somebody else's. I'm not like, this is not a judgment. It's just, I just think about all the things, like, well, when are you gonna finish them? And I understand that for a lot of people, finishing is not the objective, it's the process of it. And I enjoy the process of it, don't get me wrong, but the rush that I get when I finish something is incredible. And that is my objective. I start something so that I can have that like feeling of exhilaration when I finish it, which means that I don't end up working on a lot of things at once. And then I also, I decided that I was gonna knit all of these different complicated sock patterns, which meant that I don't have time to stitch, which is actually what I want to be doing. But I do like sock knitting too. I'm not hating on knitting. It's just, I need to find a balance. That's my like objective for 2024. Allowing myself to do multiple things, maybe be a little less hardcore about it, and just find a balance between all of the different crafts that I like to do. I also would really like to find a better like balance with Flosstube and Instagram. Like for a while I was like really posting on Instagram all the time, and then that was like too much, and then I just stopped completely. Like I would like to find a way to sort of weave it into my daily or weekly routine to be somewhat consistent, because you know, this video was supposed to be filmed 2 months ago and I'm filming it now. So I gotta find a way to just make it all work in my schedule in a way that's not too much. Again, balance. Like you don't have to do things like 100% all of the time. Like maybe sometimes you can just do things like 80%. It's okay. And the other goal that I have for this year is I really want to visit an L&S. I visited our yarn store at the end of last year that had like a big cross-stitching section, so it's kind of like an L&S. And you know, I went to a retreat that had, you know, lots of stuff for sale, so it's kind of like a pop-up L&S. But I would really love to visit at some point somewhere a dedicated L&S. I don't think there is one in my city. I looked online, I haven't found it, but I would really like to experience that. I see people walking around like the attic and stuff, and it's just like, you're in heaven, right? Anyways, so that's something I would like to be able to experience. I'm going to the Netherlands in about a month with my mom. And so I would really like to go to the Handwerk Boutique, which is in Roden in the north of Drenthe, which is the province my family's from. So that would be really cool. There's also Atelier Soudidé, which is in a different part of the country, but that would also be a really cool place to visit. And the owner is also a designer who has a few reproductions that I'm like just drooling over and dying to stitch. So maybe those can be the LNSs that I visit. So that is pretty much it for this video. I stitched a lot of stuff last year. I was quite intense about it. I kind of like this. Should I just leave this here? Let me know. It's not staying up. I can tell you right now that this is not staying up on my wall, but I do think it is quite fun. Anyways, I will be back hopefully very, very soon. You know what? I'm gonna hang up my sock. There's a gap. There's a gap right here. There's a sock. Okay, now my sampler wall is officially complete. There's a sock. And with that, I wish you a great rest of your day. Happy stitching or knitting if that's what you do. And I will hopefully see you very, very soon. Thanks for being here. Bye.